the output's pretty incredible, right? When you look at a single model response, you're talking anywhere from 50 to 70% in terms of it being on task, depending on the domain, of course. But when we start to use multi-model orchestration and synthesize all that, you're jumping to over 95% only because you have multiple models that truly understands that last 5 to 10%, which oftentimes is so critical to getting that exact answer that you want.
Hello and welcome to the AI Master Group podcast, featuring the people who are building the future of AI in their work today. I'm your host, Jim Griffin. Today, I'm very happy to have as our guest Raghav Ram, who holds a PhD from Baylor College of Medicine and is also a Wharton MBA. Ex-McKinsey, he's spearheaded multiple startups, including 2 with exits. Most recently, he founded Intelligent Technologies, which some believe has perhaps redefined enterprise AI. It brings together more than 45 language models under one orchestration layer for about the same cost per seat as just 1 or 2 LLMs. He's also the author of a new book. Welcome, Raghav.
Thank you, Jim.
You know, I mentioned just now that you're a PhD and ex-McKinsey with multiple startups. Can you fill in some of the details about that? For example, tell me about some of those previous exits you did.
Yeah, absolutely. Really appreciate the opportunity here. And so I did, back even to track it back a little, lived across 3 continents and just got a different perspective and view of the world growing up. Played tennis competitively for a while, well before about a decade in academic research, focusing on stem cell research, looking at different types of blood cancers and how we can leverage new therapies to solve that for patients. But always had the entrepreneurial itch. So after academic research, spent about a decade and a half building companies from ground up. Fractionally was involved over a dozen, but really 3 that co-founded, of which, as you mentioned, 2 led to an exit. One in the clean tech space, where we purified water better than anyone else, as well as in the fintech space to private equity, where it was more of a trading algorithm per se. And so it was the one maybe unifying theme across my career so far has been really vast amount of industry experience and the ability to get in deep into these industries, build something that solves a problem, and being able to learn from that has been extremely exciting. And while at McKinsey, last couple of years before starting Intelligent, really worked alongside private equity firms, some of the global ones, on M&A due diligence, value creation work, really focusing on software deployment, as well as healthcare and life sciences, which took me to working with some of the top 5 and top 10 pharma companies on their R&D strategy, as well as M&A diligence. So it was a lot of fun around, especially being at McKinsey, seeing the world in a different light and having a lot of work to do, not only in the United States, but also in Europe and Asia, and seeing the plethora of ways where our lives can be improved, not only with technology, but AI more specifically.
That's quite a lot of variety there. And of course, that ability to be inside McKinsey in that kind of a role is worth its weight in gold. So I mentioned just now that you've written a new book. Tell me about that one.
Yeah, no, just started going through this process, especially while building Intelligent and thinking more of the long-term vision of where do we want to be? What are we trying to achieve? And a lot of it came back down to some of the work we started alongside marketing agencies, where we help them, really take a week-long process of producing content down to about half an hour. And the power came from being able to train your own language model and bring an element of your DNA to AI. And so that's really what, funny enough, and I don't think we even talked about this, I'm actually releasing 2 books. The first one coming out early next month is on owning your own AI. So what does it take to build that private governed system that really is protecting your data, your brand, and for an enterprise, margins, right? How do you actually bring in AI, but not have to rent your intelligence to the common folks that we know playing in the space? And then the latter, the one that's likely coming out early next year, is more of a tactical playbook for enterprises, CTOs, CIOs, tech leaders as a whole, on what the private models look like, what are the real guardrails they can employ, and how do you ensure there's zero drama when it comes to AI agents and in general, how do you make AI not only work for you, but work alongside you effectively?
I love that zero drama. So let's focus in now on that most recent venture. Of course, it's intelligent. As we mentioned, we heard just now that you've built an orchestration layer. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that might be unique in the marketplace. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first off, yes, we do believe in intelligence orchestration layers is unique. We came across many tools and platforms that are incredibly effective at what they do, and they're centered around one model, one knowledge base. And as you think about it, you could go to a library and you check out just one book on a topic, and one always asks the question, I mean, is that the whole knowledge base? Is that everything I need to know on that one topic? Typically not. Typically there's different perspectives, there's different expertise, different experience that a knowledge base brings to your use case. And so we kind of took the opposite approach and said, well, we thought enterprises, businesses in general, shouldn't really be locked into any single model or vendor. And because each model has their own strengths and importantly, their own weaknesses. And that's why we built platforms like Arena that we can go into. That is this private orchestration engine that brings together more than 40 different models that are the world's best models from the leading players like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta, and even those outside of our borders like DeepSeek, Qwen, and Kimi K2. And so the whole point of this is really how do we think about bringing the best in class into one platform, but beyond what's already been trained on hundreds of billions of parameters, even some of those internal or fine-tuned models that a company already owns, or a small language model that someone's trained on a unique data set. How do we bring all of that into one library that the company can now own and actually tap into as a continuous source of knowledge, right? And so that's where this orchestration layer sits inside of a customer's cloud or their on-prem area. So it's definitely not ours. And when a user actually submits a query, Arena actually looks at the intent, evaluates it, and looks at the complexity of the domain and the context of what's being asked, and then routes it to this agentic AI model that we've built out that anonymizes and encrypts everything, right? And so you're actually talking to these models, but they don't know who you are, they don't know what you're doing, and rather than retracting information, which as an academic, I think you don't give me any context, what am I answering? And the answer always ends up being it depends. Here, we actually modify the query itself, and that's one of the patents we'll actually talk about a little bit later. But this then anonymized query is rerouted to the best 4 or 5 models for the task based on a scoring system. And so anonymized, consolidated, you're comparing, you're ranking, all of this to synthesize into this really one best answer, right? And that best, is we found over time, is actually relative. What's best for me may not be the best for you or another competitor, right? And so, but the unifying theme is you're no longer limited by one model's weaknesses. You're actually powered by the entire frontier of these models, right? And the best part of it all, you own it.
You mentioned just now that that was one of the patents, and we'll talk about that later. Let's talk about that. So I think I noticed that you have 3 patents, and they form, I suppose, part of the IP for Intelligent. Can you tell me more about those?
Yeah, so funny enough, they all feed off of each other in some way, in a weird way that they weren't separate projects, but rather one that we kind of fed off of each other. And so, well, as I mentioned, when we started with the marketing agencies, not only did we realize a custom trained model was effective, we also realized, as the basis of Arena, that every model had strengths and weaknesses. And we developed an algorithm that determined what is the best sequence of language models that is useful for a given use case. And so this is almost like you having a question about where you want to go for a vacation, and you're going to ask those friends who've been on vacations, who know different parts of the world, not the person who's never left the country, right? And so it's in essence, we have an algorithm that determines what is the best sequence of those models, which are those models, and how can you then effectively create the best and most relevant answer for yourself. And that became one of the core patents on multi-LLM orchestration. Then we also took that and applied that directly to the content engine. So how do you create a system that allows you to go from ideation of what you're trying to write, who you're trying to write for, how do you maintain on brand and on positioning messaging, and take that, leverage the multi LLM to then create something that can be immediately published. So it's a sequential process of continuous refinement to get towards your target audience in a very coordinated and AI driven way. And the key part of that funny consequence of what happened was because these language models were now working in unison and it was almost like a symphony, the chance of hallucinations started dropping. Because what we found, and I think Anthropic or one of the other language model providers published about a year and a half after we started doing this, that the models performed better when they had substrate and they could actually pressure test some of the claims being made rather than sometimes being asked de novo information. And so it was an interesting observation that we also ended up corroborating that as we had more models that were chosen to be the best, they actually ended up fact checking, reducing the hallucinations, coming up with more robust synthesis of information that's out there rather than solely just giving you access to it, which is the next step beyond getting access to information, not necessarily just where knowledge begins, but how do you now use it and own that intelligence. And then the last is more of the anonymizing and the encryption that we talked about. This is especially important for enterprises and businesses that want to safeguard their data. We've created what effectively is called our Oasis. It is a secure proxy layer where all data that goes in and out of this environment is anonymized, is encrypted, so that folks do not have to worry about their data being ever shared with the public or public models to be trained on. And so from that perspective, it's something that allows organizations to continue training their own AI model that they own and can be the center of their organization and help them orchestrate agents, pull in data from 10, 15, 30 different spots, all into one environment that they can make AI native. So it's their new AI native operating system that kind of rounded off this third one. And we're continuing R&D in the sense that we're continuing to invest on new ways to reduce inference costs, make it more affordable for every single business and person to have their own AI model, because we do believe that is the future.
So you were talking just now about anonymized and encrypted, and it reminds me to think about the whole topic of data privacy and data governance. Can we double click on that a little bit? How would you explain to a chief data officer how you safeguard data and privacy in a system that in some cases gives users access to the internet?
Absolutely. And honestly, this is the first question we get asked in every single enterprise conversation we've had. And so to plainly put it, we've built Intelligent on a couple core commitments. One is it's your model. You own the data. You own the model, which no other provider does. Second is it's always your data. We're not coming up with data. We're not leveraging someone else's. The idea is that it's most relevant to who you are and captures your DNA. And the third is this sits in your environment. It's your cloud. It's your on-prem. It's completely your oasis in your space. And so this is something that overall would galvanize your tech stack as an enterprise. And so when a chief data officer or chief AI officer asks about privacy, generally we're thinking about one, Intelligent is deployed and the whole Oasis is deployed within their VPC, so their virtual private cloud or on-prem, but never in our cloud unless they choose a private instance, right? So we're happy to also host and make it a private instance dedicated to them. But we would love for this to be within their environment so that they're connecting and seamlessly using it across the enterprise. Every single query is anonymized, so the models actually never see user identity. This is predominantly also orchestrated through these organizations not having to have 10 different vendor contracts. Everything is pulled through us. They don't need to create individual contracts with any other providers. We take care of all of that. So it's this massive consolidation that happens, almost like Expedia used to say, hey, rather than you going to these airlines or hotels, let me show you all the options here. We take it a step further of not only showing you the options, but showing you the best options that make most sense to you, while also knowing that these language models are not focused on who you are and trying to capture or see your data, right? A key part is that data never leaves your environment, which is almost the concept of the firewall that we set up. We use zero retention, so there's zero training, zero on any customer data, fully encrypted storage, and every interaction flows through some governance there with RBAC, audit logs, policy enforcements, all the things that are standard when someone cares about privacy and governance. And of course, we have all the SOC 2, HIPAA, GDPR kind of financial grade controls as well. So we, in essence, treat every LLM as this untrusted external tool, right? And it's about being safe. And so we sanitize, we tokenize, we anonymize requests before any model sees them. And that's what really came down to intelligence motto, right? Everyone has their own that really captures their ethos. And for us, it's own your intelligence, right? And that's something that with intelligence, for us, data sovereignty isn't just another feature, it's actually the foundation of what we do. And so we want to bring that to every enterprise and business.
That's very good. So one of the things I wanted to circle back on, and you were mentioning this capability, especially when you were talking about the patents and even before, about selecting, say, what are the 3 best or 4 best or 5 best language models for this particular query. And whenever I hear the word best, it implies to me that there's some kind of a scoring system. Otherwise, how do I know which one is the best? And so I'm wondering if you could unpack for me a little bit about what kind of metric or scoring system is being used, and also, based upon that scoring system, how much better these top models are than the other models that were rejected.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really great question. And the assumption you had was completely on point as well. So when through Intelligent Arena, when we select the top models for any given query, it is based on a real scoring system, part of the patent that's been out, where we're evaluating hundreds of different dimensions, right? Whether it be reasoning skill, factual accuracy, domain performance, creativity, tone alignment, hallucinations, as we know, latency, cost. So there's various different factors that go into how do we actually put everything together, right? And through that orchestration, it allows us to actually come up with a score. And you can imagine some of these scores, you've seen these probably on benchmarks where every new model comes up and says, hey, we evaluated against a ton of benchmarks that come up. Those are based on a set of tests that the average human, and especially me included, does not do every day. I am not doing the hardest math problems in the universe. I'm trying to just get some work done.
You're listening to the AI Master Group podcast.
Those are based on a set of tests that the average human, and especially me included, does not do every day. I am not doing the hardest math problems in the universe. I'm trying to just get some work done, right? In a lot of ways, that is a lot less complex in terms of reasoning, but complex in terms of the time it takes to get things done. And the quicker I get to from point A to point B in the most effective way, that's going to help me in my day. And so that's really where, rather than just looking at the benchmarks that are publicly available, we look at the individual. What is my own model look like? What am I changing in my outputs? And so KPI-driven approach to improving that scoring system happens as folks engage in their own language model. So that the scoring system is built into this AI model that an organization owns, because it in itself continues to say, how are my users using it? What can I learn from them and how they conduct businesses? How can they conduct their business? How they make decisions? What are the different tools and knowledge bases they use in order for me to provide the best output, right? And so we continue to evaluate these benchmarks internally as well. And the output's pretty incredible, right? When you look at a single model response, you're talking anywhere from 50 to 70% on quality in terms of it being on task, depending on the domain, of course. But when we start to use multi-model orchestration and synthesize all that, you're jumping to over 95% only because you have, and I'd say not only, but because you have multiple models as well as your own, right? That truly understands that last 5 to 10%, which oftentimes is so critical to getting that exact answer that you want. And so you think in regulated industries where it's incredibly important to ensure you're querying the right type of data or you're pulling the most relevant information and you have to be safe with how data is handled, we're starting to see hallucinations drop by anywhere from 60 to 80%, right? Just by leveraging this kind of multi-model approach. And so overall, the concept for us was, user trust scores are improving significantly just because the response is validated across multiple sources, right? And so that's what it really came down to. This multi-model synthesis approach is dramatically better than just a single model approach, and it reduces the dependency on any one model, right? And so that's really why we've anecdotally heard from some of our customers that intelligence is somewhat of an AI truth engine, right? And that's something that we pride ourselves on, right? It's how do we transparently provide the best data from a combination of sources.
So it seemed to me, maybe I even heard you say that the desired end state of all this might be to train an enterprise model that's going to be enterprise specific. So that sounds like one model. And so we've been talking just now about all the benefits of having all these models collaborating together to create a combined answer, and the end state sounds like it's one model. Can you help me unravel that seeming contradiction of what's the best place to end at the end of the day?
Absolutely. That's a very fair point to bring up as well. So first off, I think much like our brain, and this is how intelligent R&D thinks of this, right? Much like our brain, different parts of our brain light up based on the functions we take. And maybe it's my scientific background that I go back to our anatomy, go back to evolution as to why we as humans ended up the way we are, right? And our brain has different component parts to it. Each of them light up when we do different functions. You've heard of left and right side brain folks, and it being related to characteristics, but also very specific anatomy that lights up that we've seen. And so much like that, we imagine this world where AI models are pieced together. So you'd have an AI model that helps you conduct X task really, really well, knows the ins and outs of it, can reason it really well, being connected to another AI model. And this is a concept called model merging that folks have published on in the last year or year and a half as well. And it allows you to combine intelligences, basically. And so as we think about an enterprise, you have elements of what are AI agents, per se, quote unquote, and there's a wide array of definitions being leveraged today. But the ability for an AI model to not only conduct a workflow and task, but understand what worked, what did not work, how can I improve myself to better conduct that task or come up with a more efficient way to conduct that task, is beyond the realms of a simple agent today, but can be trained almost like you teaching a child to walk, an AI model to do, right? And that's where, whether it be in sales and marketing, and we can talk function-specific AI models, where each of these, whether it be sales and marketing, finance, HR, all these being individual models that are trained on the corpus of data that's clean, structured, and contextualized, all that coming together to a central level of intelligence. So as these individual models do change, they all still feed back into this really central AI model, right? You do want to create this one operating system that goes from taking this data that you used to scan, put on your desk, you used to now you scan it and digitize it and it lives on your desktop. And we want that to now be sent to your own AI so that it can actually keep that data. But we do think that getting smaller models, having them more effectively trained on very specific data types and use cases, and those being combined over time. It's almost like if you were to take an OpenAI model, a Mistral model, and a Perplexity model and combine them together. and create a super brain, right? I think it's what one of my co-founders likes to call it, a super brain, and I think in a lot of ways it's true. That's what we really want. We want folks to be able to piece together the puzzle that makes the most sense for them, right? And so for folks, the natural evolution is going to be for every enterprise to build that private oasis, that AI oasis, right? Of multiple different platforms that are all combined into one. So if you have Salesforce data, you have HubSpot data, you have stuff in various different data lakes, all that gets pulled into one oasis, right? Where you get to connect to it, speak to it. It's all AI native. And you're using multiple models to be able to orchestrate the data and the insights between them. And most importantly, with Arena involved, or especially Arena, we're currently the first platform that allows you to not only talk to multiple models, but also collaborate with multiple people. So you can have a whole HR function work with Perplexity, Claude, GPT, and Llama all in one chat, right? And no one's doing that yet. And it really does bring an element of collaboration, insight, and also the ability to say, even if I didn't have the greatest data and I didn't log everything perfectly, I can start today and it's not going to be at the expense of using AI, but while I use it, right? And so all these AI models that are built in-house are trained on their knowledge, trained on their workflows, and especially their industry patterns, right? And all this while living within their environment, their tech stack, governed by an enterprise's own policies, and importantly, completely owned by them, right? And so we do see this custom AI and this multimodal approach of AI building to be the future of AI in enterprise. And every major institution is going to have one. That's just where everyone's going. I mean, Eli Lilly has raced to it and has started doing it in the biopharma space, many others in other industries. But rather than just much like everyone having their own database today, it's going to be their own AI model. And we want to help folks get there quicker, but also effectively, ensuring that the AI model serves them.
You just said that every enterprise is going to have one of these, and we want to help folks to get there. But I would imagine there's probably sort of a target company profile at the end of the day, this early stage for you. And so I wonder if you have a point of view of what that sweet spot is, what kind of company really fits squarely in the target, and what's your value proposition for that target company?
Yeah, absolutely. So, especially at the enterprise level, intelligence is really built for organizations that need AI, but cannot compromise on things like privacy, governance, or model ownership. A key aspect that's come up as well now is vendor lock-in. Folks do not want just to be stuck with one vendor for 12 months. We enable the ability to test up to 40 and 25 right off the bat that have various different models, various different providers. The ability for you to see what works, and what works for HR may not work for marketing, may not work for finance, right? And so the ability to seamlessly move between these models and treat knowledge as a commodity is what we enable, but all within this private, governed, and owned environment. And so the problem we're solving is pretty simple from that perspective, right? Enterprises want to use AI, but they can't send a lot of this sensitive data that they have to the public cloud. They don't want to be locked to any one vendor, and they don't want their AI tools scattered across the company, because that's what's happened a lot. It's been siloed. So Intelligent becomes their private AI operating system, this oasis that is one ecosystem, all the models, the tools, the workflows, that's powered by this multi-model orchestration engine and allows for this custom model training platform, right? Where you're working towards building something truly proprietary. And there's levels of agent automation that's layered onto this, but at the core of it all is governance and privacy. And so our real value prop here is we're deploying AI inside the customer's environment, giving them access, so limitless access to really a plethora of language models. We help them orchestrate them, and at the end, they own it, and it's their intelligence. And so we truly believe that, again, intelligent is AI that belongs to you and not any vendor. And so that's what we want to help build for them.
So that's very compelling, the way you described that. I wonder if I could just dig in even a little deeper and ask you, could you describe for me maybe a real life example of how intelligent made a difference for a particular company, sort of like a before and after?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've done quite a bit of work now across industries. I think we've worked with now 12 different industries. I can talk about one that we've done in the finance space where we've gone pretty deep on just evaluating different data sets, pulling all that closer to into one environment, right? So it was a financial institution that relied on separate AI tools for research, compliance reporting, analytics, internal kind of agent pilots. And they also leverage some of the existing tools like Copilot. And really, funny enough, none of the tools actually talk to each other in the sense that data couldn't really be shared because one, nothing was compliant enough. But two, also every team used a different model, right? And so before intelligence came in, you're looking at 11 different AI tools, no governance, no auditability, no way to repeat what's happening, and a lot of compliance risks that came out. And the core of it all is they continually felt I'm building something, I'm investing so much time, but I don't know what I'm getting out of it. Yes, it may be helping me, but I've released this AI bot 2 years ago. Now, where do I go from here? And so that's really where we came in to be able to say, let's not only think about what today's use cases and the pain points and some of the more consultative stuff that was out of my McKinsey playbook, but rather how do we have a platform out of box that's ready to get ingrained into your environment. And so it was for all teams having one environment. There was this full multimodal orchestration, a whole set of governance and audit logs, and essentially get to having this custom financial model that was trained on their internal research. And we're proud to say this led to almost 60% in just productivity gains as they measured it through their KPIs, but really allowed us to have agents that were automating tasks, but that were governed by a model that understood their business, understood their DNA, and how they make decisions. And so that's where we think this model not only allows a company to out of box bring AI into their tech stack and let it be a group of platforms that serve a purpose across different functions. And that's what we enable with other platforms like the Brain, the Brand, the Forge, that allow us to continue offering different use cases all within one central spot. But every enterprise now has their private multimodal router per se, some proprietary model, some internal AI agent, and importantly, an AI infrastructure that runs within their governance parameters, right? And so just like how every enterprise once moved to virtual machines or cloud or Kubernetes, right? The next layer we believe is this AI operating system. And that's what Intelligence built once for them. And we're continuing to do for others as well.
So, one last question. We've been talking a lot today, exclusively, I would say, about the impact of this kind of technology on enterprise. But, it occurs to me that maybe this ability to quickly generate let's call it a best-in-class response might be of interest to an individual consumer like you or me. Am I thinking in the right way about that?
Yeah, no, of course. And it's great timing, actually. We have been quietly developing a version of Arena and Vault for every one of us. The ability to talk to all these models anonymously to every single user. And so the philosophy is very much the same. Your AI, your memory, your voice, fully owned by you. But really, users are starting with Arena and Vault. And instead of just the enterprise level governance that we've talked about, it's a private personal workspace where you're connecting to every single data source you've ever had, every file you've saved in some place that you want to be able to connect. You still get access to up to 40 different models. There's some leveling system to keep earning some intelligence stars. And so we really do believe consumers will want the same sovereignty that enterprises want. And your AI should really just be yours. It shouldn't be some public chatbot. And that's really our mission, right? Whatever intelligence you build, you should own it. And very, very excited to bring it to everyone.
Wow, very interesting. So one last question for you. If someone wants to follow up on some of the things that they heard, how can they best get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think LinkedIn is a clear way. A lot of my team members, co-founders are always accessible. Contrary to a lot of executives, I've always found over all my past ventures that responding to folks on LinkedIn is a really good thing to do. You never know where those conversations go. And so I'll always do respond in some capacity to folks that do reach out. Beyond that, email as well.
Oh, okay. Well, great, Raghav. Thank you so much. This has been very thought-provoking, very interesting conversation. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
You've been listening to the AI Master Group podcast. I'm your host, Jim Griffin. Until next time, stay curious and stay in front.